Hi, I'm Joni with Looking at Careers with Joni, and I'm here today with Steve Rule. Steve started his career years ago in the sales industry, and he's remained in sales for many years, but he's changed industries. And I wanted you to hear from Steve because I know sometimes when you're in sales, you think you always have to stick on the same path, and I don't think it's necessary if you don't want to. So, Steve, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, you went to school and studied business management, right?
Yes.
And so, when you got out of school, what did you think you were going to do?
The first time, the second time, or the third time I got out of school.
Okay,
I
surprise me.
grew up, I grew up in interior Alaska, not a lot of opportunities.
Okay,
So when I graduated at 17, I went to Oregon State
okay.
and I studied engineering,
Uh huh.
hated it. Um, wasn't really mature enough to do that. So I went back
Uh
and
huh.
eventually started school at the University of Alaska and kind of switched to an industrial engineering to work on the oil field.
Okay.
And wanted to get out of Alaska. There was the same program in Delaware. Moved out there. My father had lived in Delaware, and he's like, "Come on over."
Hmm.
The same day I started that program, I also started at DuPont, and that's when my career started. So
Okay.
while I was taking classes, I was a temp job. They asked me to travel, promised me a career if I would go on the road and supervise some teams. So I did, and they fulfilled their bargain.
Hmm.
So I started my career really in lit support
Okay.
for DuPont, and they sold their business unit to a vendor, went to the vendor. I had a mentor when I was younger. I was very lucky to have an experienced person who took an interest in my career and mentored me. And so I followed her for my first three jobs. And then I ended up at Harry and Simon, now defunct Harry and Simon in
Right.
DC, and ran a large organization over there.
Hmm.
Over the
And
course of my
and
career,
basically at that point, you were computerizing documents that were used in litigation.
yes, we actually not to sound boisterous, but when we're in that vendor quorum litigation, we're on the forefront of actually the document scanning in lit support. So before we were doing that, there wasn't really, and it would take all day to burn a CD of images and all that, and we
Sure.
did coding. And so on that scale, I ran the largest copy center and document imaging center on the East Coast
Wow.
for them.
Okay.
Loved it. It was a fun job. I still have strong relationships with the folks with a lot of the folks that I work with there. But over the course of my career, I wanted to finish school. I didn't finish school until 2004 when I
Oh,
finally got my degree.
okay.
And that was important to me because what I wanted to do growing up, I wanted to teach high school and coach football.
Well, I'll be.
Yeah, and I did
Okay.
that actually. I took a career break in 2010, got a job as a high school teacher, and tried to get into coaching in Oklahoma. It's as you know, you're familiar with some of the coaches, some of the
Yeah, I
legendary
know one
coaches
or
in
two.
Oklahoma.
Yeah.
If you don't know people, and this is probably true in a lot of industries, but within the coaching industry, if you don't know people, you can't break in.
Interesting.
And so in sales, a lot of my recent success and landing roles that I wanted was because of relationships. It wasn't because of my resume or a specific thing. It's a combination of that plus the people that I know who know me.
Right. Right.
So
And that's how a lot of life works.
exactly.
Yeah. It's what you know, but it's more important who you know. So networking is an important part of life.
So, yeah, networking relationships, and it's not always about what I can do for them or what they can do for me, but it's a give and take. I don't try to leverage my relationships to take advantage of that, but I do enjoy. Even in sales, there's a mantra that sometimes you shouldn't get close to your customers. It's a business transaction. I've gone to funerals for my customers that have passed away, and I know families and all of that. I don't believe in transactional sales in today's world. You get some of that, but really it's about building relationships, long-term relationships.
Right. And do you have any advice for people on how to do that? Because I know that that's something people stumble with. So you meet somebody, How do you build that relationship? How do you get started?
You show an interest in them as people, not just what they do. I look at it, you go to a trade show, and I don't know how many trade shows you've been to, but in my
Too many.
industry, there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Do you ever go in as just an attendee and you've got your badge and you never see the person in the booth look at your face? They're always just dialed into who you are right there. Okay, who are you? Oh, can you do something for me?
That's true.
That's the mentality I try to avoid. Look at their face, then you look at their badge. Yeah, it's nice to see who you're talking to, but that shouldn't be the focus.
Right. Right. You don't need to know how important they are for the company that they work for.
To show an interest in them and engage with them, exactly,
Right.
because you never know. I mean, and I've had a lot of deals where I've met someone that wasn't the right person, wasn't in the market, that led to another relationship that led to a sale. And so and I think I spoke to you about this before. What's worked for me, I used to view sales as, okay, I've got to hit this number and I've got to do this for me and my job's on the line. It's me, all about me.
Right.
And then when I realized that if you change your mindset, and this is what works for me, I don't view it as a sale or a non-sales. If I can solve a problem for a customer and they're happy at the end and I'm happy, then I've done well. And I don't want to be in those sales environments again where I'm pushing so hard that they're miserable when they buy the product and they're never happy down the road, or maybe some of the features were, really a core issue for the customer that we don't do, and I sold it anyway and they're not happy. So I don't do that. So it's really, for me, networking and relationships and sales are all the same. It's basically, I'm interested in you. I, on a personal level, I know things about you personally that makes you unique and interesting. And hopefully I have some uniqueness and interesting things that you find intriguing enough to spend time with me. And if eventually, if there's things that we can do to help each other, we will.
Correct. I live the same life. Yeah.
Yes.
That's great. So when you changed industries and you went from legal and whatever kinds of cases that you worked on back into oil and gas, how was that transition?
It was tough because it was a completely different but very complex industry that I'm in now. And it just took one person taking a chance. And I try to kind of instill this where I'm at now. It's easier to train somebody your industry and learn the product in the industry than it is to train somebody to sell properly, in my opinion.
Right.
I'd rather get a really good salesperson that's smart, that can pick up on things, that has sold complex systems before, and then train them on the nuances of this specific industry. Okay. So changing industries doesn't have to be difficult. It is by default to get into, because a lot of companies will look at industry experience first rather than sales success first. And I think that might be backwards.
Yep, I agree.
You can have a lot of industry experience, but can't sell anything, or can't solve problems, or miss the mark, or turn customers off. And a lost prospect that's a good quality prospect that we should be working with because of a bad experience or a bad salesperson, I think is worse than not having that prospect to begin with.
Yeah. So if you're interviewing for a job and you don't have the background of that industry, what do you say to somebody that you're interviewing with to kind of let them know that the soft skills that you have are more important than the industry skills?
Well, the first thing I'll do, though, is I'll do a lot of research, and I'll show that I can learn a lot about the industry. I'm not going to know nearly enough in that industry probably to start, but I will know enough to show that person I'm interviewing with that I'm serious about that industry and that I can pick up on things. And I'll do my research on, and sometimes I've gone a little overboard because I'll research the person interviewing me and I'll end up, they're much more public than they should be. And I'll know where they live and where they went to school, where their kids live. It's like,
of course, yeah.
You don't share a lot of the information, but it. It's like, so yeah, I show that I've done the research, and I fall back on my past experience.
Right.
Because in sales, the first thing that a hiring manager wants to know is, where were you percent of quota, or what kind of volume did you do? What was the size of your average deal? How long was the sales cycle? What was your typical sales day? What did you do to prospect? And they kind of want to get in your mind of how you did things in a certain way to see if what they're doing matches what you did before.
Right.
Because if you go from, a really transactional type of sale, it's a very different thing than, a 9-month, year, 2-year sales cycle. And sometimes that can hurt you. So as far as the industry goes, it's just basically researching. I show that I've done my homework as best I can. I know who the competitors are. I ask questions. And really, if you're in a sales interview, it's the same as, you need to be on the same par as if you were conducting a discovery call or doing a sales presentation. You need to have that same mentality because you're selling yourself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I'm a salesperson. I believe everybody sells, whether you think you do or not. You sell every day.
Every job is sales. I know.
Even if you don't have a job, you're selling every day.
That's true. You're
Yeah.
exactly right. And so when you get that job in a different industry, then you have to meet the players to be able
Mhm.
to sell the product or whatever you're selling. So do you just jump on LinkedIn or some social media?
Well, most of the companies are going to have a volume of contacts already established. And
Yeah.
that's the other challenge changing industries. Why they want people in the industry is they think you're going to bring ready-made prospects to the table, and that's very challenging sometimes because you might be in a different segment of the industry, and you might have sold software that was completely, has a different reputation. There's different price point, so they want you to bring in those. So if you don't have that, what tools does the company have? And that's the question you need to ask in the interview: is what tools do you have to, bring in prospects, and how do you engage with those? And LinkedIn's part of it. Industry trade organizations are a big part of it. Groups. So LinkedIn has a lot of different groups that you can follow and engage with people and experts. You can ask questions on how do I, what's the best way to network in this community.
Mm-hmm.
State associations in the oil and gas are very important to what I do. Because they put on a lot of the trade shows and regionals and all that. So, knowing the ranking members there and having them help you, because there's, a state organization has it's a symbiotic relationship between their members and themselves. They need
Right.
people to help them attend the trade shows, promote them, do, other activities. And we need them to put the right people together so that we can go and communicate with them in one place.
Right. And so what you're saying is a lot of it isn't just going to these groups, but it's being an active participant in the groups
Yes.
and being
Add
able to
value
really
wherever you
connect.
can. If you can add value, networking is easier because people will come to you rather than you have to go seek them out. So, and if you're adding value or if interest or, your time and your efforts. So, time, treasure, and talent, if you devote your time to the organization, they appreciate it. If you donate, buy their products, they appreciate it. So, or if you're an expert at something and you speak at an engagement or a show, they appreciate that. You write an
Mm,
article or something like that. So
yeah. Would you rather be in sales or sales management or a combination of both?
I like the being an individual contributor, but my career goal is to, build a team. I've had
Okay.
teams in the past, and so that's the path that I'm trying to kind of stay on. Is, I'm a director now, director of sales, but build a team, vice president, something along those lines down the road.
What's the key in mentoring your team members?
Ooh, one key, probably impossible. So the way I've done it is by example first and foremost. I don't ever ask anybody on my team to do something I couldn't do myself, and it's constant feedback to your team, and it's not always negative or positive, but it's constant feedback in every aspect of my life. I don't view anything as a failure. If even if I fall flat on my face, if I learn and get better, that's not a failure to me.
Mm-hmm.
In sales, you deal with a lot of rejection. I mean, you get used to rejection for various reasons. You get close to a finish line and then something changes, and you lose a deal or you get postponed. There's all kinds of things that can go wrong in sales.
Right.
So having the right mental attitude of not letting that, you can't overreact to any situation. You got to be calm, but you also have a sense of urgency and passion for what you do, and you show that. So for me, it's just basically, if it depends on the role, but if they're in a business development role and they're on the phones and they're making calls, you listen, you give feedback, you encourage them to ask you. You don't judge them based on the questions they ask, because every situation is different. Every question is valid. There's no such thing as a dumb question. There are dumb questions, but there aren't. I don't hire dumb people. So if they're asking me a question like that, there's a reason, and then we talk about it. So I look for team players that have good attitudes and work hard, and that's it. I mean, if you have that and you can think on your feet and you put the prospect or whoever you're dealing with first above your self-interest, and you can engage with them, and that's what I look for.
And I think what you just said, being a team player, doesn't just help the team, it helps the individual grow too. It's really important. If one of the players is out for himself rather than being out for the team, it usually pulls the whole team down.
Yes. And if you're not training your teammates to be able to replace you someday, then you have to ask yourself why. And if you're insecure in your job, or if information control is a big thing that I see. You don't give them a lot of information, or you don't share everything that you're hurting the whole team. So I think I'd like to be able to take a vacation, and the only way you can do that in these industries and these jobs is to have somebody that can fill in for you for a week. Okay. Right. And if you're not training them to do that, then they're not going to be able to achieve their career goals. And some of the folks that I've worked with in the past, are doing really well. And I'm very proud of that. And if I had a small part in that, that makes me happy.
Yeah.
And when I see them in person, I will take all the credit, not just a small part.
I'm with you.
Because that's how I roll.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's great. So any other advice you have for people looking to make a career change, or even just to go in? What if I have never been in sales, but I think that's my next step? I want to go into sales. How do I convince somebody when I don't have any track record?
A good way to get into that is if you have product knowledge, if you've done implementations or you have technical experience, get into sales by being a sales engineer for a product. Mm-hmm. So you're on the sales team, you're doing a lot of the demos and the product demonstrations and the technical stuff. And that's how I got started. By default, I ended up being a sales engineer because they needed somebody that knew the product. And it's a good stepping stone because you get exposed to all the sales cycle. You're in the sales process. You're a vital part of a lot of sales organizations, but you don't have all the pressure up front. You're not responsible for asking for the deal to close, because that's where a lot of people who are like, "Ooh, sales, I couldn't ask people for money."
Right.
That's one part of what we do.
Right.
So that's where I would recommend. And if you're in a position where you're not happy and you're either micromanaged or you're miserable going to work, why, look for options. There are, in today's market, there's a lot of options. People are looking for talent, and talent is very hard to find. So if you've got talent, you've got options.
Right. Yeah, I think that's good advice. I agree with you. So, I think that this is real helpful to people looking to make a change and to get higher in sales or just to go into sales. I think everything that you've told people is just right on. So I appreciate you talking to me today.
Very welcome.
I think this is real helpful, and hopefully we'll talk again soon someday.
Of course we will.
Of course.
Boomer sooner.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
There you go. So again, I'm Joni with Looking at Careers with Joni. If you liked our interview today, please press like and subscribe to this channel. So thanks again for watching, and Steve, we'll talk again soon. Thanks a
All right.
lot. Bye-bye.